there's been a few changes in the tech world.
Is ChatGPT getting dumber? This debate has raged for months now.
You see this from brands, I think, that are inherently really creative. They almost attach themselves to absurdity.
In order to unlock the ad, which will change the trajectory of your business, you have to have done thousands of other things.
Teams aren't rewarded for taking risks, getting it wrong.
Building a great content team is way more important than building a great marketing team.
Companies underestimate the amount of volume they have to do to get to the right answers. I'm Oliver Yonchev, co-founder of a company called Flight Story. My co-host, Catty Cathal, Cat, one of the co-founders of Third Web. Cool. So we got onto our second date. That's a good thing.
Always a great sign. We made it out the DMs.
Out of the DMs. Wonderful. Cool. All right, mate. Well, look, I'd love to pick up a few things. I think what makes sense, there's a couple of things I've thought have been interested in the world, just around marketing and content. And there's a couple of brands that I'd love us to have a deep dive into. And then beyond that, there's been a few changes in the tech world, platforms. TikTok shops hit the news. X is always in the news. So I want to kind of get into some platforms and what's happening and discuss those things. But to kick off, I'm going to suggest, I'm going to tell you a story, right? So we were recording some content with Steve, and we were going through some of the chapters in his book. And within his book, he talks about the value of absurdity. If you think of in the world, we're always trying to rationalize things and make sense. We're in a very data, insight-rich world, but there's something magic about absurdity because what it signals and what it says. And the example in the book is what we experienced was at our old offices with a big blue slide in the middle of the office, the first thing that you see when you walk in, and it's the thing that everybody remembers. That is kind of absurd, but then it signals, what does it say about you as an organization? And you see this from brands, I think, that are inherently really creative. You know, the ones that hit the headlines time and time again, they almost attach themselves to absurdity. I think best example for me, Tesla. Tesla are always doing like strange, novel, absurd things. If you think of like the sounds that you can get, the like weird coding things that happen. I think there's a whoopee cushion as a module within a Tesla. So there's like all these random features that end up adding to the value.
They blasted a car into space.
They did what?
Blasted a car into space.
They did. That is pretty absurd. That was pretty absurd.
That was absurd as it gets.
What happened there? Tell us the story.
I think Elon Musk strapped a Tesla to a rocket and blasted it into space, and now to this day it orbits the Earth. That's about as far as I know, but
okay.
I think he's the king of absurdity.
Yeah. But there's quite a lot of marketers. If you think of brands that have maybe made a reputation for being a little absurd, you can think Burger King are well known for just pushing boundaries, being a little irreverent. Brewdog as well. I think Brewdog's a really interesting example where they're very much about steering into controversy. A lot of betting brands like Paddy Power, they will do absurd things. Talk to me about your perspective on absurdity in marketing, and also just some examples that you respect, rate, or something that's happening in the world right now.
I think absurdity is a luxury for a lot of brands. I think because there are a lot of brands where they have to protect their image and they have to appear premium. They probably don't get the luxury of being absurd and doing things which really, really stand out. I think some nice examples I've seen recently, though. So absurdity is, creativity is what unlocks absurdity. Coming up with some kind of great idea that really cuts through, taking your brand and putting it in an unusual position, or putting your product in an absurd place. But that can often be expensive and difficult to execute. I really like this kind of workaround I've been seeing recently from brands who are using CGI in a lot of their marketing efforts, and doing it in a way that kind of creates absurdity. So a lot of people reacted to and saw, I think it was Jacques Mousse, who took kind of, there was a video going around, a viral video of their handbags, like giant versions of their handbags the size of double-decker buses on wheels driving around. I think it was the Arc de Triomphe in Paris during Paris Fashion Week. And everybody took that clip and they posted it on LinkedIn and posted it on Instagram and said, "Oh my God, I can't believe they did this. How did they create this? What an incredible piece of marketing." Most people didn't realize it wasn't real. It was, a 3D render. It was CGI. And it kind of kicked off this trend we're seeing of some of the biggest brands in the world, particularly luxury fashion brands, are taking their products and creating these very hyper-realistic CGI 3D renders of their products in crazy places. I think Jack Moose did another one. It was one of their handbags blown up, but like a giant inflatable in the sea, the size of like a giant yacht. I think Alexander Wang did a pair of their underwear was hanging on the Brooklyn Bridge, a giant pair of their underwear, and it's so believable. The technology's got so good that we see it and we glance at it and we assume it's real. And I think that's a great way to exercise absurdity without having to spend much money. Really, you're paying for the cost of a 3D designer and whatever the rendering is.
Yeah, and right now you're right. I think the first thing I saw that showed up on my LinkedIn feeds was Maybelline, and it was the really clever, smart ads where the subway, the tram, the tube, I can't
Yeah.
remember, one of the three things, some underground. It was probably the subway actually, and Maybelline New York had the lashes on the front, and people didn't know whether it was real or fake. And again, what are we trying to do with advertising? Why would you be absurd? Because people talk about it, it's memorable. And that's what that was. I actually saw, I think it was Kylie Cosmetics did a version not long after, but got a lot of backlash, didn't have the impact. I don't know. I don't know how far you can go or how far you can run that as a strategy, but I think as part of a bigger campaign, if you have a strong creative platform and it's a tactic to complement something else you're doing, I think it can work. It's the same reason that you will do smart out of home placements. How many brands have just paid for one placement in Times Square to get the shot that the creator stands in front of, right? That happens time and time again. I would say, though, you mentioned creativity, you mentioned absurdity has to be expensive. I probably disagree with you a little bit here. I think big noise, flamboyant, take over the world, giant placements, sure, that's expensive. Activations are expensive. But if I think of a brand like Brewdog, they recently had something this week where they had a bit of insight where everyone was like stealing their glasses. They have a Hazy Jane, which is a particular shaped glass, and it's quite attractive. They got to the point where they have a shortage of these Hazy Jane glasses. So what do? They say, we're going to do an amnesty. If you just bring back your stolen glass, you get a free pint of Hazy Jane. So like that's quite an absurd, irreverent sort of thing to do, to speak about, to attach to. But I suppose it is going to cost. It's going to cost them a lot of points, but they are going to get their glasses back. That's the important thing. So I don't know. I just think creativity is the vehicle in which you end up spending less if you are truly thoughtful, and it's your only response whenever your budgets are constrained.
I think that's just a great example of the idea kind of hiding in plain sight for them. Like, people stealing glasses from pubs is a centuries old problem and probably a centuries old marketing gimmick. I'm sure breweries have always wanted people to steal their glasses, and the reason that they will pay, the reason they want their glasses in pubs in the first place is because it's like an advert every time somebody takes a drink. And I think what Brewdog are really good at is kind of taking what's very plainly obvious in front of them, and then repackaging it in a great activation. And what they also have is incredible distribution. So like no other brewery could execute this because no other brewery have their CEO as the kind of face of the brand on LinkedIn, ready to access tens of thousands of people. They would have to run this idea through television commercials, through print, through whatever kind of distribution methods they have, and that would take weeks and a lot more money. This is a brand where their CEO can take this idea and basically get, for a very almost nominal fee, they can figure out if it was a good idea. They can just look at the immediate reaction just by posting about it. I think they're one of the brands that just really understand the power of distribution and how much that actually lowers your advertising cost.
Yeah, what do you think enables that? Is it a philosophy that an organization has? Because we speak and have spoken to marketing teams all the time. And I think you'd be hard pressed to meet a marketeer that doesn't want to do really creative work, doesn't like really thoughtful concepts and ideas. Um, but we don't see enough of it, right? Like you say, some of
Mhm.
the greatest ideas are hiding in plain sight. There's a simplicity and clarity to them. Why don't we see more great creative work?
I think Brewdog are willing to die by the sword. So I think most brands don't like criticism and they get very protective over their brand values. And I think Brewdog are a brand who are a lot more lenient in that sense, and they have an executive team, a CEO who's willing to kind of put his neck on the line and be bold with creative. But the key is that they're willing to get it wrong and they're willing to
Mm.
face criticism and they're willing to own up to it. We've seen, I think I've seen as much criticism to Brewdog as I have celebration. But it
But
levels out.
you're talking,
Exactly.
that's the point, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot more conversation around them as a brand because they're willing to, try a lot more, put their neck out there and get it wrong and really own up to it. And I think there are some other things. There are some, conversations they've had around
Mhm.
like culture and things that have had negative consequences, but that just comes as a byproduct of being loud and being in the media.
Yeah, it's the saying that is, any brand company can pay for attention, but you have to be brave to earn it, right?
Mm.
And that's,
Mhm.
I think, couldn't be more true when you think of Brewdog. I read a tweet this week actually that was my first reaction to it was, well, that's bullshit. Great marketing is consistent. You're showing up in the world time and time again in really cool ways. And this tweet just said, you're one ad away from changing your entire business. Keep testing. And we've spoke about this before. There's always those kind of just uh, almost moments within a company that end up either changing their entire strategy, they unlock a channel that didn't exist before, and it can be simply something as simple as one new ad. So my allergic reaction was like, oh, that's nonsense. But then the more I dwelled on that thought, I was like, yeah, that's so true. Have you got a perspective on um, finding those moments for an organization? We spoke last week about yours very much being a hidden in plain sight, obvious product feature that ends up
Mhm.
being a huge marketing lever. How do you think about those types of things?
I think I think it's one of those um, points which does have a lot of truth in it, but it in order for it to be to get engagement on Twitter, it has to be hyperbolic and it has to be very opinionated. But there's actually a lot more nuance there. I think you're both right in that in order to unlock the ad, which will change the trajectory of your business, you have to have done thousands of other things which compound towards that one ad. Um, I think I've got a good perspective of growing a business at the moment, which there hasn't really been one single thing we've done which has taken us to the kind of growth curve that we've tried to achieve. It has come from trying hundreds and hundreds of different
Hmm.
things. I think what you do get is you get the occasional piece of insight which lets you know what you should be doubling down on. So you get that like one YouTube video you post or one tweet that
Hmm.
goes out, then kind of clicks, oh, this is the channel I should be executing heavily on. I think when you speak to a lot of businesses, it's usually one channel that they've used to grow the majority of their business from. And so
Yeah.
often it's just identifying the channel or identifying the tactic that you think is gonna work for you. Um, it's great to think that a lot of brands do have that one piece of creative that goes viral and changes the trajectory of their business and gets tens of thousands of people. Well, actually, I speak to a lot of founders who have found viral success, um, on somewhere like Twitter, and often the users that they get from an activation like that aren't very sticky. There's not a lot of retention there, and they'll find that their growth curve usually comes back down to where it was before.
Hmm.
What it does do, it gives you a lot of information on your users and probably gives you good momentum in the right direction. But I would say I would agree with you where 99% of the time it isn't one post or one ad that will change the trajectory of business,
Hmm.
but it might unlock an insight which will allow you to execute in a way that does.
Yeah, I would add that it's also an enabler to other stakeholders that may not believe.
Hmm.
Probably one of the bigger reasons why we don't see more great work is we don't have the right philosophies, or teams aren't enabled, encouraged, rewarded for taking risks, getting it wrong. It actually probably has to stem from either a disruptive brand. Their origins are disruptive in their sector. They've had to
Hmm.
create their way through to gain advantages over the incumbents. But I generally have this thesis that, you know, companies only really need to get really good at one thing early on. They just have to get good at one thing. And you've spoke about this a lot. Just get really good at content marketing. I watched a video and it was from someone speaking about how to get really effective at TikTok ads. And their number one tip was get really good at TikTok content marketing, and then you'll be phenomenal at TikTok ads, right?
Yeah.
So there's always enablers, and I have this belief: year one, get good at one thing; year two, get good at two things; year three, get good at three things. And I think in the marketers today have so many choices. I do think it's quite hard to stay disciplined like that. We
Yeah.
resist the urge. We're a B2B business. Our number one channel is LinkedIn. And we're always resisting the urge to inject 5% energy in this other channel, this other area. We are experimenters within the confines of our channel that we still believe there's a huge amount of unlock. But I am often conflicted with this because I think you can hold two beliefs. Extreme focus is really important, but your outlier advantages exist somewhere else. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there's like most things in marketing, it's like it depends.
Yeah. I mean, it's a case of having a good framework for experimenting quickly and then killing ideas quickly and having no kind of
Yes,
emotional
yes.
attachment to them. So I think we found this similar way where I have this anxiety that, oh my God, we're not posting on TikTok or we're not doing YouTube shorts. But I actually know that it's probably not what we need to do because we're doubling down in other areas. And then,
Hmm.
I think we spent like a month smashing YouTube shorts to see if it worked, and it didn't. So we killed that idea. But actually, like, I feel a lot better now that we tried it. And so, like, it's just a case of having a good framework for, okay, let's give this a go. It doesn't work. Let's forget it. But I think a lot of
Yeah.
people forget to turn it off. And next thing you know, you've spent a year posting YouTube shorts. It's done absolutely nothing for you.
Bro, shocking. People do not kill redundant activity.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
social media is moving daily. Algorithmic factors are changing. Things that worked yesterday don't work tomorrow, and we get so attached to formats. And I actually think it's largely due to the fact that we operate in these elongated planning cycles. And the
Mm-hmm.
reality is most great work can be somewhat planned, reactive, but it's a little more spontaneous. There's a little bit of magic involved. It's not as thought through. I was speaking to someone yesterday, and we were talking about this moment that a brand had, and they were like, "Yeah, it was genius." I went, They didn't intend to do that. That was luck." But if you do the right things consistently, luck has a habit of working with you
Yeah,
and not against you. So they did have their luck, but most great, I suppose, cult transcendent marketing activities aren't as intentional as most people think.
yeah. I think you're right. What would you
Uh,
say if you're a brand? What would you say is the thing to get right in year one?
I think year one is, and I'm going to give a boring answer. I think companies underestimate the amount of volume they have to do to get to the right answers. So year one for me would figure out a system where you have a framework and a process in place to be able to produce lots of content in a few areas, not lots of areas, pick a few channels and do exactly that. Have this objective framework which you kill, assess ideas and creative and content, and then gear up through a process and kill ideas, introduce new ones, and reiterate your way to a formula. Marketing, in many respects, is either principle led or formulaic. So I think it's important that you understand those, and I'd start there. And then from there, one of the things we've found, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of brands because brands have different problems. But in terms of promoting an agency, we found our hygiene content doesn't really add any value. Our KPIs and measure of success are reach. We want to reach as many people that are relevant to us, and we want inbounds. We want people to contact us because they like our perspective on the world. And one of the things I noticed, we're in this real point where I go, even if we're spending 30-40% of our time on hygiene content on LinkedIn, maybe we kill it and just go all in on these sort of
Big beats.
big beats. Yeah, we call them moonshots. We say our marketing strategy is to think like a VC. We're chasing 10x returns. 5 of the ideas we do aren't going to give us 10x returns, but every so often we get them. But every percentage you spend in somewhere that isn't giving you the propensity or potential to achieve those 10x returns, you're missing something. So if I'm giving advice to a brand, number one is get your process, your systems, your philosophy, your measurement framework in place and learn, and just do what you said there. Just kill stuff that doesn't work. Don't hold on to it. Don't be romantic about it. And that's so important.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in just getting content right first. And
Yeah.
I think building a great content team is way more important than building a great marketing team. And like what I mean by that is I actually think like having knowledge of kind of really granular marketing tactics, things like SEO, things like paid advertising. I actually think that's really overrated in an early business because a lot of people, a lot of brands or startups, and I'm always thinking of it from startup lens, but I think it applies throughout. They obsess over getting these kind of like, I need an SEO person, I need like a paid marketing person, these kind of like traditional or I guess like evergreen marketing tactics. They get those things in place, but then they have no content to distribute, and they have bad content to distribute. And what's much harder, I think, is hiring a great designer or finding a great video editor, or finding a great copywriter, somebody who understands how to write content. And I think getting those things in place is way harder and far more important. If you get that right, a lot of the time distribution will figure itself out. Like you'll create content which is good enough to carry itself to the right places, but also you can put the other things in place a lot easier. When you have good content, it's a lot easier to distribute. It's much harder the other way around to distribute bad content. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I always say that like figure out great content first, hire a great content team, build a media company, and then figure out distribution.
Who's your first hire? You're getting your starting 11. What are you looking for? Talk through the qualities that you're looking
Designer.
for. Designer, number one,
Yeah,
designer.
number one designer. I've always thought this, and this becomes this. This is because it specifically complements my skill set. Um, but if you have someone who is a good marketing mind and can write good ideas and can come up with good copy, all you need is a designer to put those things into action, to really execute on a lot of those ideas. That's going to be what you're going to need a lot of the time when it comes to plugging the gaps. I say a designer because it's usually easier to find than an editor, and an editor would always come next. A great video editor, again, it's creating great video is just a higher barrier to entry. Fewer brands will do it, so you have much more opportunity to cut through. So yeah, when it comes to my starting 11, it's always starts with production. Great designer, great editor.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to go with, if I'm giving you my starting 11,
Yeah.
and the number of brands I recommend that do this, and I would hire a content creator. And this is, I'm talking in hyperbole and universals. It's different for everybody. But in a lot of cases, I'm hiring a really good TikTok creator, someone that's gaining traction in a platform that you want to gain traction in. I think there's something about just being immersed and understand. I think we underappreciate content creators by large.
Mm-hmm.
You know how fucking hard it is to grow a massive YouTube channel? The
Mm-hmm.
years of relentless dedication to win
Yeah.
and the knowledge that you have to gather over time. The same is for TikTok. And we trivialize it because it happened quicker for people. And we see a lot of like random, silly, almost like freak show type stuff with a lot of momentum. So it does trivialize, but to just be an actual like thoughtful professional content creator is really hard. So number one for me, for most startups, I would try and hire someone on that growth curve on a channel that you want to win in.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And we see the people who win in content creation. We don't see the tens of thousands of
Yeah.
channels that die every day. And it takes a lot of resilience and a lot of discipline and persistence as well. I think that's a good point. How do you find someone? How do you find a content creator that works for you?
I just think it's super easy. Like if you're at the start, you just go on some you admire and like. Like with some of the clips I was sending to you and Jay, I just see this content creator on TikTok that has a really cool. He has some really good hacks to use imagery in video, and then he's talking about that and has cultivated this big audience. If I'm a marketing agency and I'm just starting up, he was a US creator. I'm trying to hire that guy. I remember being, in New York, and I was trying to hire the guy that had cultivated a large audience on TikTok, sorry, on Twitter, of social media managers, because we were a social media agency. So yeah, I don't think you have to overthink these things. I think I have a real bias for just action. And
Mm.
a lot of companies, people don't. We have to get the job spec, and we have to just find someone, DM them. The number of
Yeah,
people I've hired just from just random DMs of like, hey, I really like what you're doing. Would
yeah.
love to chat. And in most cases, people will hear, because it's probably less familiar, right? For someone just to go, hey, in a casual way, I'd love to meet. I admire what you're doing. We're all human. We all like a little bit of flattery. So yeah, I just start there. Dude, I want to segue into, we talked a lot about what we call memes, content marketing, creative, the world around us. But we do also really obsess over technology and the machines. I read a fascinating article around 2 weeks ago, and I think it's worth debating. There was an article that said ChatGPT 4 is getting worse. It said ChatGPT 4 is getting worse. And some of the speculation around that was the challenges they are having powering the large language model. These systems require huge amounts of processing power, and there's a chip shortage across the world. So it's a real challenge, and there's a belief that there is an intentional slowing down of capability in the public domain. That's one of the theories, right? Or what the journalists speculated. I'm going to go a step further, and I want to get like really conspiracy theory on this. I want to go a bit adjacent and say what I think is actually happening. So when you train a large language model, a big part of the training is in the same way you would teach a child to how to do something, if that's good or bad. And you're literally signaling to the machine after an output. You put a prompt, you get an output, and you say if it's good or bad. Is this correct? And you punish if it gets it wrong, right? What happened through, and I don't think anyone at OpenAI expected ChatGPT to have the success and adoption that it did. And as a consequence, by plugging it into the internet, you've now got everybody now training this model. So there's part of me thinks, and again, I'm going full conspiracy theorist here, is the machine getting dumber because the people training the machine are not the carefully considered specialists? It's me, you, everybody on the internet, right? There's part of me thinks that could be it. What's your take?
I mean, it's definitely getting worse. I know that we used to use ChatGPT to write a significant amount of our content, mainly to take, we've produced a lot of technical content, so we will take long technical explanations and theses and have ChatGPT help us digest them and split them up into comprehensible sections for things like Twitter threads and YouTube descriptions, things like that. It used to be really good at that. We used to have no problems whatsoever, very little editing required. And it just seems to have kind of lost its touch completely. We can't seem to get an output which doesn't require completely rewriting the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just an anecdotal experience, but we have reduced the amount we use ChatGPT significantly. Why that's happening, I have absolutely no idea. I don't know how large language
Oh,
models work.
go down the rabbit hole with me. I'll tell you a story, right? My favorite. I use this in talks a lot, and it was basically one of the early large language models from Microsoft, and it was a casual chatbot, and they basically it was called Tay Tweets. This was years ago. They plugged it into Twitter, and the idea was you would tweet Tay and you would get casual and playful conversation back. What happened when you plug anything into Twitter? Within 5 hours, the Tay got a little aggressive. Within 6 hours, it was a bit bigoted. 7 hours, it was definitely sexist. Within 8 hours, it was racist. By 12 hours, I'm sure the comms team, everybody involved, was in absolute having a nightmare, right? An awful day. And that was because when you plug the internet can be an unusual, toxic at times, polarizing place. And I do have to think if all the intelligence, or certainly a lot of the contributions that are happening now to these large language models, are coming from the public domain and it's been democratized, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. The people building this deep tech and involved in the space are way smarter than me, so they'll figure it out. But it is interesting to see something that should be on an exponential curve get better and better. And you're saying in real time, it's not. There's certain user cases that it's not as good. Just on ChatGPT, I think it's worth. What's like a really cool user case that either you've used or you've heard people using ChatGPT that's not normal, not for like copywriting or doing a script or some market research? What's a really unusual example that you think, wow, that was smart?
I think that I think this isn't super out there, but I think the time when I used it and it was like, holy shit, this is a godsend, and this is very, very, very powerful. Was we need so our CEO Furkan, he's an incredible tech leader, has years and years of experience building internet products across basically every single era of the internet. So super knowledgeable, and we wanted to write an article earlier this year, which was taking a lot of thoughts he had about the direction blockchain was heading. And so, obviously he's a busy guy, doesn't have much time on his hands. He can't sit and write this article out. And we don't have the knowledge that he has. So like, how do we access his knowledge and how do we translate it into an article? So what we did was we got on a call and I just threw questions at him and he kind of threw answers back at me. And obviously when you sit in that kind of, in question answer environment, you get back a lot of good information, but it isn't necessarily presented in a way which will translate to a great article or a great piece of writing. But we basically recorded the call, so had him give us all these answers, kind of brain dump on us. We then recorded the call, used AI to transcribe the call, so we had it in full writing, exactly what he said, and then plugged that directly into Chat GPT and said, could you restructure this into this article that we're trying to write? And it basically took everything he said and rewrote it in a way that was more eloquent, easier to read, and more presentable for a long form piece of writing. And I didn't have to do anything. And if you think just that ability to kind of take someone's ideas and translate it into a long form piece of writing and not take up hours and hours of their time, that's just one of those things that wasn't possible 2 or 3 years ago. And so, okay, now like a business like ours where we're building a technical product and we have engineers who are doing things that we can't as marketers comprehend, and we need to act like some of the best marketing we can do is accessing their thoughts and telling our audience about like why they're doing things and the theory behind what we're doing. When you're non-technical, like being able to take those ideas and beliefs and use AI to structure them in a way that is marketable and presentable is just like a real light bulb moment for AI, in my opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I love when I hear how offended writers get. They go, oh, it's just garbage, the stuff it produces. Trust me, if you put a very considered prompt in that is thoughtful,
Yeah.
it's absolutely incredible. And it's very easy to go, yeah, if you go, write me an article about marketing, it'll be generic and it'll be just some blah, right? Of course. But if you get really structured and you become the composer, that's effectively what you become. You need to know how to ask the right questions. You then, in effect, become a composer. And to be a really good composer and ask good questions, you have to have a lot of knowledge. So it's not about either or. It's really like thoughtful, great marketeers using these tools to enable them and make them better at the thing that they do. It was really interesting. I was thinking about that question, and I saw a tweet that again was like a really cool user case. And there's so many novel ones. Like we're using it a lot across our finance systems, rationalizing big data sets, looking for trends in huge amounts of sort of category data. So we're using it for like really rich insights, which I think is interesting. There was one that I thought was good, and it said here, Chat GPT hack for you didn't ask for. I've been pulling our reviews and sorting them by length. So he sells things online. And he said, I read the longest reviews first. So just a really simple prompt, like I want you to pull out the longest reviews. And just by just doing that simple task, long reviews are usually really rich with insight. So extrapolate that to comments, pull all your comments on one of your channels into a spreadsheet, have that rationalized and say, can I take the longest, or can you tell me some themes or trends? That's incredible. And I think historically within any organization, you have an insight or data team that are your lifeblood of knowledge and insight. And now we've democratized that. Every function has the ability to ask the right questions and get the information they need to empower them. So I'm massively encouraged by this. One thing I will say, I'm just going to go off on a tangent because I need to like get this out my system. Since we've seen all these new generative AI application layers, and we see all these automation processes coming to the forefront, I think our lives, online lives, are going to get, particularly in B2B, exponentially fucking awful. The number of automated messages I get on a daily basis
Yeah.
is horrendous. The number of emails I didn't ask for, it's getting to the point where like I am low key triggered every time I see one. And I know I shouldn't be. I know what it is. I know it's an irrational thought to get bothered by something I can't control. Yet, I think automation, because of these applications, is going to ruin a part of what we ruin a big part of certainly marketing, sales, business development, those types of things.
I think it's probably, it might kill email. Email will get to the point where it becomes unusable.
Yeah.
Like hitting inbox zero now is almost impossible. Like I'm the same. I just have an outrageous amount of spam email, and sometimes I'll miss something important because I'll kind of glance at it and assume that it's not relevant to me. Um, so yeah, I think there needs to be some kind of alternative. I'm not sure what it is, but yeah, I agree. Like the number of AI generated crap on LinkedIn and email now is getting out of hand.
Yeah, and I'd probably say the advantage is those that are just smarter, better, and not commoditizing these tactics. Because
Yeah.
automation has a huge role. There's loads of things I'd rather not do, and I could automate. Great, let's work through those systems. But having your sales process led by automation agents is absolutely ridiculous. It truly is.
Mhm.
And to your point, I think platforms got unusable. Um, and we don't talk enough about the cost of frustrating people. We talk about reach and impressions, and I've hit this many inboxes and I've done this. You've just pissed off 1 million people. You might have reached 1,000,001, but like, what is the
Yeah,
impact for your organization of annoying that many people? And like, we
I
don't
agree.
always consider this. We get, I suppose, caught up in the technology and
Yeah.
don't think of the impact. Programmatic was the same. You remember this? You would have programmatic engines come to you and talk about the degree and the science in which these hyper targeted ads would hit the person in the contextually relevant way. Bro, you're showing me a little pop-up banner ad on a website that I don't want to see. Let's not pretend it's something it's not.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
Uh,
I would often advise against sending, sequenced AI emails. If I see a brand do that, I immediately lower my opinion on their brand equity. Like I just don't expect to see it from the best brand. So if you're sending a very kind of unconsidered, you have to unconsidered kind of outbound email. You have to consider the damage that could do to your brand. Like you wouldn't see Disney do that. You wouldn't see Coca-Cola do that. And so yeah, I think it's a good point. Like the kind of like the obscure damage you do for people probably don't think about.
Yeah. It's a problem, dude. Let's conclude on two things I want to do. I want to speak about Twitter X. I don't know whether I still call it Twitter. That feels very natural to me. I'm trying to lose the word and say the word X, but I still haven't landed it yet. There is a rumor. We'll start there, then we'll go into TikTok. There's a rumor that Twitter is giving mad ad returns right now. There's a rumor that like unthinkable returns on ad spend. There was a guy that had basically said for 60 cents, he got 22,000 clicks on an ad set. I'm like, that's just bots, probably. However, I do think two things are really interesting that are happening right now, and you can speak to this, but the placement itself is almost indistinguishable in feed. That's one part of it. And the other is X have lost a lot of advertisers, and to win them back, there is nothing like giving really cheap inventory. So give me your take. Why are we seeing, and maybe you've done some testing yourself, why do you think that X is potentially an arbitrage that more companies should look at?
I think it's the reason you gave. The placement has completely changed. I think Twitter are always a bit scared of, of putting advertising that could be misinterpreted as advertising. But if you look at every other successful ad product, the things like TikTok, even like Instagram, Facebook, it's very like discreet, the kind of label that is an advert. Whereas Twitter's was always very obvious. It just looked very kind of like poor on the feed. And they fixed that. And now an ad basically looks like a normal post, apart from a very small kind of label in the top corner. And I think that's great. I think that that is why a lot of brands are now seeing those returns, because it's not something you're going to scroll past now. So I think the
Devil's advocate there, and devil's advocate, is that deceitful? Ads should be really obvious. Content marketing is the antithesis of obvious. But if someone said to you, I don't feel good about that.
I think it is. It says ad. It says ad quite clearly. I think we're just used to Twitter's advertising being too obvious. I think if you look for more than half a second, you'll see the ad label. And I think, users are smarter than we give them credit for. As they start to use the product, they'll know what that ad looks like now. Like, they will be familiar with this new label. And so, yeah, I think like obviously like being deceitful is bad, and there will be low quality ads that are approved and that will kind of sting people. But I agree with also what you said, that Elon just needs to get people back on board. And there were never any advertisers on Twitter because it never worked. So they do need to fix that product in general. It was mainly their targeting that was poor. So I'll be interested to see if they've actually fixed their targeting, because a lot of the time it was just not going to the right people.
Yeah, and they didn't have they don't carry a lot of data, right? If you think of not the same amount of data that Meta have. No, it's not. It pales in comparison. If you think you're onboarding, for a long time, they didn't know how. I think they knew how old you were and like your name, if that.
Exactly.
Like that's all they knew for a long time, which is systemically flawed. One thing I will say, just on the ethics of an indistinguishable ad, I will say, like my natural inclination is to try and find opportunity and then take advantage of that opportunity. So when I saw the ad placement, my first thought was great opportunity. I was like, that's indistinguishable, that's subtle, great. I suspect I had that sort of signal that it would potentially be a fruitful new opportunity from a paid standpoint. What I will say is, you say people are smart, and I agree. But I do remember a time when my nan would just get conned on Facebook every week, like genuinely just get scammed into clicking on things. So I do think there's a whole generation of users. It's the same way we have like real Western bias. We also have internet age bias. We think of the people around us who we interact with. And I just think there's a lot of people online that probably do need safeguarding to some degree.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's true.
Cool. I want to talk a little bit, just to finish off, let's talk about TikTok. I think we probably can't go an episode without mentioning TikTok. But there's two things I thought really interesting this week, so I'd love to get your take. TikTok Shop is really ramping up. It's had some really fruitful returns. There was a creator from Manchester, a beauty creator that's just been on platform for a few years, and it was shared that he had made 2 million of sales in TikTok Shop in a week. For a independent creator, that's phenomenal. That's transformative in many respects. TikTok, I suppose, the promise of social shopping has been a thing we've heard forever. For at least 7 years, we've been saying this is how they do it in Asia. Obviously, we're going to change our shopping habits and social shopping. And Pinterest didn't really win in that arena. Instagram didn't really win in that arena. And they were both really well primed. And then Sleeping Giant comes along, search engine, recommendation engine, you name it. TikTok comes along, introduces Shop, and it seems to be doing really well. What do you think about it? What do you think of TikTok Shop, and is there an opportunity for brands right now?
I think, like you said, it makes sense on TikTok because they have all of the other pieces in place. They have great discoverability. They are better at segmenting users and letting you know what your interests and the brands that you like are. And they've also kind of teased the kind of user behavior with their live streaming, and people can gift and spend money on creators. And so people are a little bit more trained to get their credit card out and spend money on the app. Whereas on Instagram and other apps, it just wasn't something we were familiar with. I do still believe that there is this gap for a lot of brands where they want to own the experience. And so like someone like Gucci, someone like Louis Vuitton, checking out on TikTok, I don't know if that's going to be something that's always going to work for their kind of customers. They're going to prefer to check out on a premium experience and on a surface area that they're familiar with. So that's the piece I'm always never quite sure about, but maybe that's just a different way of thinking, a new paradigm that I need to get used to. But it makes sense. And I think that, like you said, this is something that has been happening in Asia for a while, and TikTok obviously grew in that market first. They just know the playbook to get there. Whereas I think Instagram were always kind of that step removed.
Yeah. Insider knowledge. I spoke to the head of product at Instagram, who, this was a few years ago, the lead engineer. And before they'd kind of started to retract actions, as in sort of make it less of a priority within their mandate, he basically signaled everything you said. It's with the best will in the world, they're struggling to make it work. And you raise a really good point around platforms train behaviors. The environment, eventually, we conform to the environment. We're programmable by design. That's a psychological principle. We all are. I use this analogy sometimes about music being, if I go in a car and all I can listen to is metal music, I might hate it day one. I might hate it day three. By day five, I'm kind of, by day seven, you like it. Like, that's the truth. We're programmable by design. And when we spend so much time in these virtual worlds that are social platforms, we are being programmed. And I think people, I don't know how I feel about that. We all like to think we're a little more autonomous than we probably are. But yeah, it's a long-winded way of saying TikTok Shop, go try it out.
Yeah.
Cool, dude. Right, I got one last thing I want to finish on, and I want to find like rituals, and we can change them up every week, but I want to find something that people get value in that others aren't talking about. And I think we should just tackle something controversial every single week. So, my controversy of the week that I wrote down, I wrote lies agencies tell clients. And I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing or breaking news, but what are some lies that agencies tell clients? And just reveal all. Spill.
It's been a while since I've been at an agency, so
Even better, you could be more honest.
yeah. What lies did I used to tell?
Do you want me to kick off? Do you want me to
Yeah,
just
you have to
start
kick off.
ranting?
It's been a
I'm going to
while.
go.
Yeah.
most agencies' timesheets are absolute nonsense. And I hate the idea of commoditizing time in the way it's why the ad industry is broken. Ad industries and agencies charge time. So what they have to do is justify that time, which means they may not be spending that time efficiently. What I should be paid for is my outcomes, my results, and the outputs, not how long it took me to do something. If I've built a proficiency that means I can do something that would take you a week and I can do it in 5 minutes, I should be rewarded for my 20 years of learning about that thing, not for the 5 minutes I spent doing it. So I have a problem with that. Ad agencies, timesheets, it's all fugazi. A lot of it's nonsense. That's one. I think there's another thing, and you'll know this. If you have a really good idea that a client doesn't buy in a category, you're trying to sell that idea to someone else, particularly if you want to see your work in the world. The amount of times there's been a creative and you're like, buy this thing because you need it. It's great. They don't. You're ready to pitch that to someone else. So that's I think a dirty little secret. They were the two that came to mind. I was like frustrated with timesheets and I was thinking about ideas.
But, I mean, you have to price your time somehow, though. So is that not the way?
I don't think I think in part, yes, for certain tasks. But I do think we should transition to an industry that is more anchored to outcomes and not time, because it's not sustainable. What you have is you have two dynamics happening at the same time. You've got salaries going up, which is a good thing. No one disputes that's a great thing that people in advertising are being paid more. I remember when I started in marketing, my salary was it was like £18,000. No, it was £14,000 for the first advertising job, and annually. And I remember just thinking, oh, this is great. But, if you were to offer someone in London, that salary today, you'd be laughed at. And you're probably right. It's probably right. So I just think the dynamics of time going up and procurement and brands squeezing agencies to try and maximize value just leads to a era of mediocrity. You're never going to get the best people doing your best creative work with the best outcomes if you squeeze people so they can't make money. So yeah, that's a problem I have with that.
Man, I don't know if I have anything.
Wow.
The thing is, I told the truth.
Yeah, lies is hyperbole. Lies is extreme. Bro, I've seen you talk about a strategy that took you weeks, but it was a night the day before.
Yeah,
So don't be acting holier than thou.
I think agencies are often detached from the result of their work. So, I think a lot of the times we'll tell a brand that something will work. Actually, we have no idea, and because a lot of the times we don't actually, as an agency, you don't actually get insight into the data. You don't know which tactics you're doing are actually driving results. You have a lot of theories and you have a lot of ideas. So I'd say a lot of the time, I remember I used to sell ideas or sell tactics. Did I actually think they worked? I had no idea. I just knew that I knew the brand would buy it. I knew it would sell. And I guess now I'm on brand side almost. A lot of those theories are true. A lot of it does work. So I think there is that validation. But I remember at the time thinking, I actually have no idea if any of this stuff works. I just know it's new and it gets engagement, which I guess is working in that sense.
What a way to conclude. You liar. Catty, you've been out there scamming folk.
Look.
You're one of the good guys. And I actually think I've certainly tried. I go into every conversation being really clear that marketing doesn't always work. Genuinely. I think it's your greatest line of defense when you're honest. And I don't think most agencies are, to be honest. I'll put that out there. Cool. All right, dude. I've loved the chat. We went on a bit longer today, but we covered a lot of ground. World to rights, memes and machines. And I'll see you next week.
It's been great to chat. See you next week.